might not be aware of it, Atos are basically going to be losing the contract, as you know, you're aware of that. Next year, they're going to lose the contract. What few people know is that a company called Maximus is going to be taking over. They're a notorious American corporation who have got up, who are basically, they're basically robber barons. That's what they are. They've been fined for fraud, $30 million to the American government for basically defrauding Medicaid. They've basically been involved in discrimination against women. They've also been involved in essentially in other frauds as well across different states of the United States. So the Tory government decide they are the suitable replacement for Atos to come in and do the work capability assessment to further impoverish the poor, the sick, the dying and the disabled. And they're going to come in, and as John McCardle from Black Triangle said the other day, it's from the frying pan into the fire, and that's what it represents. So this Maximus will be taking over next year, and while Atos were getting £100 million for what they were doing, this corporation are going to get £500 million for what they're doing from the taxpayer, from you and me and every other British taxpayer, and that's what's going to happen. Further on from that, that's on the employment support allowance. Further on from that, we also have a Scottish company, a company called Salus, S-A-L-U-S. Now they're in the public sector, believe it or not, a part of NHS Lanarkshire, and they are doing all the assessments for the personal improvement payments, the PIP payments as they call them, and the personal independence payments. And essentially they're based in Argyll Street in Glasgow, subcontracted by Atos for £22 million for the whole of Scotland. And their target is to get 20% of the disabled off benefits altogether. What was the old DLA was now the personal independence payments. They're going to get 20% off, and that's a saving of £2.2 billion for the government, for the whole of the United Kingdom, Saluses and all the other companies that Atos have subcontracted. Now, what we have got to do is to keep the fight up and basically fight back. And what's happening in Atos, and what's happening with these companies is they're going to further impoverish people and drive the disabled, the sick, the poor and the dying into the gutter of poverty. The fact of the matter is that we've already seen it. We had this situation that Mark Woods was a young man, well, relatively young in his 40s, who suffered from Asperger's syndrome, suffering from essentially autism, who Atos decided was fit to work and took his employment support allowance away. 6 months later, the police battered down his door and they found that man dead. He died of starvation, weighing 5 stone 6 pounds. What a way to live in the 4th most unequal society in the world, and one of the most wealthy, but it's the 4th most unequal society in the world is Britain today. We also had Eleanor Tatton, who was highlighted in the Daily Record, who was a woman who had a brain tumour, cancer of the brain, and who was deemed fit to work. And she died 5 weeks later after she was passed by Atos as fit to work. We had Joseph Caston from Drumchapel, 23 years of age, who had a serious heart condition 2 years ago, came out of the Atos session and dropped dead 2 streets on from Cadogan Street. That was one of the reasons why we started doing the direct actions against Atos, and for doing the picket outside Atos at the end of every month. And there's one on the last Friday of this month, and we'd urge you to come along. It's on 12:30 in Cadogan Street, and I would urge you to come along at 12:30 on that day to show your solidarity and your fraternity with the people who suffer, the sick, the disabled and the dying, and the poor. Moving on from there, our children are living in our society today. We've got 239,000 children living in poverty in Scotland today. The 8 leading charities, hardly revolutionary groups, the Child Poverty Action Group, the Poverty Alliance, etc., stated that we are in a crisis, an absolute crisis of poverty. It's a catastrophe waiting to happen because another 100,000 year 2020 under the union and under the politics of austerity. And the politics of austerity are going to get worse. We're now seeing that people's benefits are going to be frozen and cut in real terms over the next number of years. And who has signed up for that? The fact of the matter is the Tories are the ones that are causing it. But all the political parties at Westminster have signed up for it. Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, the Red Tories, as I would call them and Theresa rightly calls them. They have caused this because Miliband and Ed Balls said to the City of London earlier this year that they would implement the Tory spending cuts over the next 2 years. £25 billion worth of cuts, and that's what they would implement. So all the Westminster parties are going to do this. So it doesn't matter next year if you vote Labour, Tory or Liberal Democrat. If you vote these unionist parties, you're going to end up with absolute poverty and an absolute decline of this country becoming a more unequal society. Now the fact of the matter is that the Labour Party through John Lamont has been demanding from Nicola Sturgeon that they abandon the idea of a referendum for the next generation. Well, I'm afraid the poor, the sick, the disabled and the dying can't wait another 10 years or 20 years for a referendum. They can't wait that long. The fact of the matter is all the major political parties south of the border in London are supporting the big banks, corporate companies and the rich individuals, to the extent that all the FTSE 100 companies are sitting on a cash surplus of £53.3 billion. £53.3 billion, and they're going to do absolutely nothing with it. They're just sitting in this pile of cash, and the only thing they're doing is paying out bonuses for themselves and for the top executives, and that's what they're doing. An absolute moral disgrace, but it's completely impracticable because Britain's about to face another major economic crisis. We're about to enter another recession because Osborne and lots of others have been warning about it. The fact of the matter is that's what's going to happen. And what we're seeing very, very clearly, what is the way ahead? How can we turn things around? Well, I think this gentleman, Darren, hit it on the head. What we need is a massive redistribution of income and wealth, a radical change. That's what we need. And we need it through independence in Scotland. And how are we going to achieve it? Well, 80,000 members are now in the SNP. The Scottish Socialist Party have got 2,500 new members, and the Green Party have tripled their membership. So all the parties that support Yes have a massive membership. But this is the warning I've got for the politicians. The people are on the move and they're going faster than the politicians are prepared to go. And what we're saying very, very clearly here tonight is we want to get through to 2016, and with the majority of votes cast and with the majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament in 2016, we should unilaterally declare independence for Scotland. And that's what we should do in 2016, in 2 years' time, because we cannot afford to wait. Because we've been lied to, we have been manipulated. We can't await another referendum for a year's campaigning for the elite of this country in London to tell their lies and frighten people. You don't realise the lies that were told. The rigging of the votes that went on. And yes, they were rigged. There was vote rigging that went on. And I'll tell you the lies and the deceit that went on. The workers out at Hewlett Packard. Who's the workers that work out in Bishopton? They were told verbally that if they voted yes, they were going to close the plant down 3 weeks after the referendum. That's what the workers at Hewlett Packard were told in Bishopton. We were told, where we worked, that prices would go up. Other companies did the same. They frightened their workers, threatened them, and that's what they did. They threatened them and said they would lose their jobs. On the shipyards, BAE threatened workers saying that the shipyards would close if there was a yes vote. This went on all over Scotland. The elderly were told, you'll lose your pension will be taken away from you, when it was all lies. Lie after lie after lie. And that's the terrible thing. You may turn around and say, where Dan was concerned, say that we've got to work with the people that voted no. Yes, for those that we have to work with in the working class. But don't believe one thing. We are a divided country because the vote was on social class lines. The working class voted yes, and the upper middle classes, the middle classes voted no. That's the way it happened, and that's what we have. We have a socially divided society. And the fact of the matter is, we're going to be a socially divided society until we get independence. Because the working class got registered to vote and they're not prepared to wait any longer. He said revolution. Yes, there'll be revolution. Because the revolution will come in 2016 when we get our independence through the mandate, which was the policy of the Scottish National Party for 50 years. And that is the facts of the situation. For 50 years, that was it. And we can achieve it in 2016. And believe it, you, me, the people in the yes camp are not going to stand still. And the bridgehead to independence was built with the referendum. We have got a bridgehead of 1.6 million people ready to go again and who are not prepared to wait for things to happen and are prepared to get involved now. Make no mistake, the meeting tonight is a starting point. And from this point onwards, we're going to go forwards. Now, one thing I want to make clear, I was not pleased at all with the meetings and the rallies that were held in George Square over the last number of weeks, because it was decided 2 weeks ago by Mr. Sheridan that he would choose his speakers, and people at Darren were kept off the platform. I was kept off the platform, and other people wouldn't go near it because of the controversy regarding the money situation. And then on Saturday, the STUC and the Poverty Alliance held a rally in George Square, and again, Darren and myself were denied a place on the platform. That is not people power. That is groups trying to control 1.6 million people, and that must not be allowed to happen. People should be allowed to speak if they wish to speak from a platform. It's got to be a people's platform. Like tonight, people should be allowed to speak up here at the top table or from where they sit. And everybody should have that chance to speak. Because this is a people's movement. This is a social movement. This is what the 1.6 million people are. They're not there to be controlled by politicians. Politicians are the servants of the people. That's what they are. They're there to serve. And the people decide what happens. And that's what has to happen. And the other thing I would say is that a gentleman who is here tonight very bravely went on YouTube to say that he picked up 156 votes that were yes votes, and he picked them up from Duke Street. Now, I can tell you here tonight that I got one of those votes, and I was told, leave it alone, don't go near it. It's a bunch of nutcases. It's not genuine. Well, believe you me, I did not take that seriously, because I felt in my guts that something was wrong. Not to the extent that the vote was rigged, to the extent that the vote that would have changed the vote. However, 156 votes lying in the street that was all yes votes in Duke Street has to be investigated. So I took that vote and I handed it over to a newspaper that was against independence, because I thought, well, if they can look at it and say that it's genuine or not genuine, we can respect that they're not biased for independence. So the bottom line was, I took it to the Daily Record and handed it over to the Daily Record. Now the Daily Record reporter took it to an expert off the record, and the expert has said that he believes the vote is genuine. The vote that I handed over is genuine. So that would mean that the other 155 votes are genuine as well. Which begs to say, why were 156 votes lying in a bag in the middle of Duke Street after the referendum? And these were people who had voted. These votes were meant to be incinerated once it was over. We also have the controversy whereby the votes, when we voted, there was no actual barcode on the back of the votes. I didn't look, because I wasn't thinking about it at the time when I voted. I was too busy wanting to make sure I voted yes. But 400 people have come forward and given testimony and handed it over to Naomi Wolf, the American campaigner who came over from America, on the barcodes. Now, at the beginning, I was a bit sceptical about the whole thing. However, I met a man a couple of weeks ago who was a polling officer for 20 years in Moray, up north, and he turned around and says he examined the back of his vote before he voted, and there was no barcode on the back of his vote. Now, that's a man who should know what he's talking about. There is something smelling here. There is something wrong. There is something wrong in the state of the United Kingdom today. There has to be an independent investigation of the voting and what went on. And especially Ruth Davidson. Ruth Davidson was on a national television programme and she turned around and said, just after the referendum was over, we believe we got a good result before the votes were decided, because the No campaign looked at the postal votes and counted them, which is against the law. So she should not be a witness. She should be getting prosecuted for what she did and for what the No campaigners did. But will Police Scotland do anything about it? I very much doubt it, because the gentleman who had the 155 votes sent it to Police Scotland and they denied he ever got those votes. They are lying. They are lying. They got the votes. They were sent in good faith and they got them. Well, the one vote that we did retain has been told that it is a definite, genuine vote. So I would expect the Daily Record to go in now and do an article on this and call for an investigation of what actually went on during the polling that took place. 100,000 people signed a petition believing that the vote was rigged. Are we saying that those 100,000 people are wrong? And the politicians who turn around and says, oh no, it wasn't rigging, it never took place. Well, I'm sorry, but I think there has to be an investigation that has to take place, and the ones that counted the tallies on the postal votes should be prosecuted, because it carries a year in jail and a £5,000 fine, and they have to be prosecuted. But my main message to you guys tonight is to go out there and tell your families and tell your neighbours that there's a campaign to be won. We've got a nation to claim back in 2016, a nation that will be independent, a nation that will redistribute income and wealth, a nation that will give a decent income to our poor, our disabled, our sick and our dying, and give a living wage to the people who work for a living 40 hours a week so they don't have to struggle month to month. And we will eliminate